Hello and welcome to the All About Pigeons podcast. We have a very special episode for you today, so stick around. Today we have with us Chad Ward. He is the president of the Texas Center of Racing Pigeons Club, president of the Northwest Florida Invitational Racing Pigeon Club, and the owner of the Blue Angel Classic. He's also the vice president of the Deep South Concourse. He's had many winners and won loft races at Hoosier, Florida Pigeon Derby, Big Andes, California Classic, World Cup, and Sooner. And today we're going to talk about racing pigeons and tips and things like that to help new fanciers and hopefully some advice for other flyers. So, Chad, thanks for coming on and talking with us today.
Yes, sir.
Let's just start off with your own background with racing pigeons. How long have you been doing this for and what got you started?
I've been doing it for a pretty good while. My father was into the racing pigeons when I was younger, 8, 10, 12 years old. And then we kind of got out of the racing pigeons and did other things, growing up in my mid teenage years and got away from them. And then back in my early 20s, mid late 20s, somewhere right in there, I got the interest in getting the pigeons again. I got pigeons for a few years, and then we had Hurricane Ivan come through, which wiped my loft out. The loft I was using was my dad's old loft. The hurricane come and wiped my loft out and killed a bunch of my pigeons. So I was kind of out for a while. I didn't have the money, to rebuild a loft, and I was out of it again, about 5 or 6 years. And then I built another small loft. Had the bug ever since, and now I have two big one loft, that we keep the one loft birds in that can hold probably 600 or 700 birds, and then I have my breeder loft with 20 something individual pens and a separate section for the hens and cocks. We've been back into it big time.
Do you fly your hens and cocks separate or do you fly those guys together?
And the young birds we fly them together, and old birds I do fly them together, but I kind of made them up a little bit. Sometimes I'll send the hens, sometimes I'll send the cock. Depends on what they do in training and how they feel and everything else. But I have flew just about a little bit of everything. I've never flew the dark system, but I flew the light, the widow hood, double widow hood, single widow hood, a little bit of everything, and I've had good luck with majority of all of it.
So let's talk about training a little bit. So what's your approach to training the young pigeons for racing? Like how do you gradually build up to that endurance or whatever it takes to fly the bigger distances, and what ages do you even begin training like that?
I'm a heavy trainer on my one-off birds and my own personal birds that I race in the club. I like to train a lot. I try to go every day. Once I start training, I try to start about 6 weeks prior to the first race, and I try to train every day that the weather allows me. Because here I am in the South, it's hot and humid. We have lots of rain. We have fog, a lot of times during the fall part of the year. So there is certain days that we can't train, but try to train every day that I can. I start them about a mile or two. I take them a couple times just to get them used to coming out of the basket. Then my next toss is 10 miles. I take them 10 miles probably two, three, 4 times. Depends on how they act and how they come home after the 10 miles. And I jump them pretty quick after that. I'll take them to 20 the next time, 2 or 3 times, and then 30 to 50 miles is my train. You know what I mean? I try to go 30 to 50 every day once I get them that far. I like to train 50 miles at least twice a week whenever we're racing.
Do you go all four directions or do you know where the race is going to be from and kind of go in that direction?
No, sir. I live here on the Gulf Coast and I can't go south.
Oh.
But but I train predominantly north, northeast, northwest. That's our race course is kind of a north course, but we do fly a little bit to the northeast. That time of the year we have a lot of east winds, so I try to train them a little bit to the northwest, and in case they do get blowed off, they kind of know where they're coming from.
When you're training the young birds, what is your feeding and trying to keep up with nutrition and the exercise? Are you doing a different feeding for the young birds during training than you would for the, birds that are ready to fly in the race?
Yes, sir. I feed the Baden Carolina mix, and I mix a lot of barley with it. I like to keep them pretty light. The barley seems to help with me, and I because I like to make them get up and fly. Towards the end of the week, I'll add a little more of the Carolina mix, take a little bit of the barley away, just get them ready for the races. Because sometimes it's pretty tough here that we do have some bad races, and they need a lot of energy in the tank to come home.
So you're talking about when you were doing the early bird releases and stuff like that, getting them used to the crate. Because typically on a race day, wouldn't they spend overnight in a crate and then they would do the release?
Yes, sir. Our races, we basket on a Friday normally and race on Saturday. So they have a overnight in the crate. In my training, I like to about 2 weeks before start catching them at night, putting them in the crate, and then get them used to spending the night in the crate, drinking out of the waters. They have I don't want no surprises on race day.
Okay, so you do that is considered like like crate training them and just
Yeah, crate training them. Yeah, and with my club race, we have like I think we have 9 flyers this year. Then we had our first race last week. We had about 200 birds, and I try to the first probably 2 weeks before the first race try to get with some of the other guys and have a group toss. Where they get used to having to get with other birds and get away from them, break, and learn the way on the way to come home by themselves. Because I would rather them get lost on them couple of them group tosses beforehand and learn a lesson instead on the first day of race day.
yeah, I've heard of some guys that'll do once their birds are good at coming back at a certain distance, that they'll do one, wait 15 minutes, and then release another, so that way they don't just go with the flock mentality.
I've did that a lot different this year. I tried some things. I've talked to a few people, and that's what they told me that was working for them. So I did try it on several of my 50-mile tosses. I would sit there and I'd have my basket of birds, and I'd reach in there, grab one, get him out, look at him, write his band number down on a list, throw him in the air, get another one out, do the same thing. 3 or 4 minutes later, while that bird's still circling some of them had left, as soon as we turned them loose. And then that way, whenever I got home, I had my clock going, and I could see the way I turn them loose and to see the way they come home. Because most of the time, some of them would stay there and try to group up with others, but some of them would leave, and some of them you could tell, this is my first bird that I turned loose. He was the first bird home. You get to about the middle of the pack, they all probably turn them too close together, and they're still wanting to circle and group up. But towards the end, at the end, them birds was ready to go home. So at the end of my basket, I had 5 or 6 left, and I was still doing the same thing, tossing them, and them 5 come home on their own because the other birds left. They was ready to go home. And you could tell by writing them down what order that you turn them loose in.
I got some homers that I do releases with, and the young birds that I'll do is they say to kind of let you get to the spot that you're going to release, right? And you just let them hang out there for like 15, 20 minutes to kind of get their bearings. Is there much weight in doing something like that? Or do you just, when you get there, just open the crate and turn them out?
Most of the time, I don't like to wait. I like to get there and turn them loose. I mean, on our race days, we do because I water them and all that. But on these shorter tosses, most of the time, I pull up there and I turn them loose. So sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It just depends on what else I got going on that day too.
Yeah, if you're busy, you got 20 minutes for sitting there.
Yeah.
Just
Some
turn them
days you
on.
do, some days you don't.
With your young birds, do you have them in a different loft? How do you keep them, for the birds that you're training and the birds that are, race ready?
My one loft race is a late hatch race. So right now they're just loft line. I have them in a different section in the same loft, but in a different section. So I'm actually training them, but I also, have my one loft birds that, are just loft line. They're in the same loft, but they're not the same pen. Understand what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Okay. Yeah. You got different sections in there.
Mm,
When you're doing like your loft management for your other birds as far as feeding and watering, so you're individually kind of catering to each one of those sections in your loft.
yes, sir. I feed different. Feed my race birds different than I feed my one loft birds. My one loft birds, they're most of them still, babies, and they're still growing. So I like to feed them a lot. I don't try to ration as much on the babies once they get to out, riding and flying and getting ready to race. I do cut back on their feed, but right now while they're growing, I want them to eat and grow.
So compared to doing club flying and stuff like this, like one loft races that you participate in, so you're sending off a bird that you're really assuming is going to be a good flyer, right? Like you can see your birds flying on the club races and you can pick out from there. So what's the challenges compared to club flying when it comes to submitting a bird in for a one loft race?
Some of the terrain that we fly is the same as some of one-off races that you fly. But here where we live is pretty much flat until you get to 250-ish miles, and then we get up in the hills of, in the northern part of Alabama and the lower part of Tennessee. It's a little different course once you turn them loose at 250, 300, 350 miles, that they've got to come through the mountains and the hills and the valleys to come home. And then it's a flat shot all the way back home. Sometimes the first 100 miles is a little challenging for them. But once they get through that, they're on the flat coming home. But like we fly some of the races in California, they release them in the desert in Arizona. And then they got to go through the desert and then fly through the mountains back to into California. So it takes a little bit of different special bird for different areas that you go to. Like compared to Hoosier right now, they're flat, and the race course has been pretty good this year. You got to have a little bit of different birds to fly different courses.
So when you're breeding a bird, you're taking into consideration where that bird's going to be going.
Yes, sir, I do. I have different bloodlines that I like to send different places.
What bloodlines do you fly right now out of your loft?
I have the Kittles, and I have some best Kittles, and I have some of the longer distance pigeons, the new Laureates, some Hoobins. I have a little bit of everything. Try some Leo Harrimans. I try new things. I do crosses, breed them straight. I do a little bit of everything. What works for me, I try to keep along that line, but I will outbreed and cross breed back into what has been winning for me.
I was just going to ask you that. Do you kind of do best with the best, or are you sticking with a specific bloodline?
I like to put winner to winner.
There you go. Yep. I think that's a good way to do it myself.
Yep. Most of the time, if you breed winner to winner, they have that mentality to produce babies that are winning. And a lot of times, like, we had two birds that did good in the California Classic and the Royal Cup, which, they're in the same yard and they fly the same direction. So I bred the bird that done good at the California Classic to the bird that done at the Royal Cup.
Huh.
And hopefully we'll see what they'll do this year.
Yeah, hopefully they do good for you. Seems like they would.
Yeah.
So let's talk about recovery after a race. So what is your post-race recovery protocol for those birds?
My post race recovery, as soon as they come in, I have two waters set up in the loft. I have one with honey and water, and I have one with electrolytes. I give them a choice of whatever they want. They get that for a day. The next day, I give them, I go back to my regular routine that Monday. Normally, Sunday, I give them a day off, relax, and doing whatever. They get a bath that day. Monday depends on how hard the race was and how many hours they flew. Sometimes I'll just leave them resting another day. Sometimes I will loft fly them. It just depends on what the race has been on Saturday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays is normally my train days. Thursday, I might get a short toss in. Fridays is rest day, and we ship Friday night.
So besides the honey and the electrolytes, is there any kind of supplements that you use, or is that it right there?
That's all I use in the water.
Okay.
I do use some oil and some red cell in the feed certain different days, and then the Primalac. I use the Primalac.
Yeah, people really like that red cell. I've heard a lot of good things about that.
Yep, it gives them lots of vitamins and iron.
So when they come back in, are you kind of hanging around to just check to see if everybody's okay, if there's been any injury or sickness after a race, or do you just kind of watch them the next day in the loft so that they're flying around? And it sounds like you give them a little bit of a free day after that.
Yeah, most of the time you can tell the next day when they come back if they don't feel good, if they went down in, what I mean, they'll be all hunched up in the corner, then they gonna get something different. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
I have a medicine cabinet full of stuff that I don't like to medicate my pigeons too much, but I will give them one if it needs it.
Does your club require vaccinations for doing tosses together?
No, sir, my club doesn't.
Oh, okay. Do you do any vaccinations for PMV or anything like that?
Yes, sir. I give mine the rotavirus vaccine every year.
Oh, okay.
I vaccinate all my young birds that I raise and all the birds that come in for the one loft race. Every one of them gets one round of the rotavirus. I've had good luck with it. I hadn't had a bird with PMV or any other serious stuff since I've been doing
That's good. It's preventative, I guess. You don't want to
it. Mm-hmm.
deal with the aftermath of an outbreak.
No.
Just hearing, you got a lot of experience and, you see a lot of new people coming up in it. What are some of the common mistakes you see new fanciers making when they get into the race world?
What I see is that they think that they know so much because they've watched or listened to on the computer or wherever, that they're scared to ask, the veteran flyers, well, this, what I mean, what do you do? I mean, just they think they know it all, and they don't want to be told what they're doing wrong or ask for help sometimes. My recommendation for, anybody that's getting started is get with somebody that's local, that's flying, and get some pigeons from them. Pick their brain as much as that they'll give it to you, because most of your local guys are pretty knowledgeable of what goes on in your area, what birds fly good. What you may do in Arizona don't work for me here in Florida.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of knowledgeable people throughout the world that's into pigeons, but what happens and does good for them may not do good in the area that you're in.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. It's best to talk to someone who's local.
Different loft setup, you know what I mean? Some people have a more closed in type loft, like up north or whatever, because it gets real cold. Well, whereas down here in the south, we have a more open, like my loft, the front of it is all wire, and I have graded floors, so mine gets a lot of airflow because it gets hot here in the summer. It gets 110, 115 degrees with a 90% humidity, which makes it miserable. And the pigeons has got to breathe in there. They can't be in a closed up loft because they'll say sick, because there's no ventilation. Whereas somebody up north that would need more closed up than they would here in the south.
Yeah. And you also talked about getting a lot of moisture up there, and that's definitely not a friend in any loft. So I
No,
imagine that kind of a floor like that, you get a lot of good airflow and everything stays pretty dry.
a lot of times you can go there in the middle of the day when there ain't really, you can't feel a whole lot of wind outside, but you can walk in the loft and it's cooler, but you can feel a little bit of a breeze sometimes blow through there.
What do you guys do when I mean, especially where you are, hurricanes and everything else come through there? What do you guys do when it comes time for that? I mean, are you guys just canceling the race and doing it again, or?
Most of the time we pray that we don't get a hurricane, but but the guys in South Florida, they've got hit bad last week with a hurricane, and they're going to get hit again this week. But if it gets to be a hurricane, we will cancel, because a lot of times everything's shut down around here. The trees is blown down. There ain't no gas nowhere. I mean, it's a disaster after a hurricane.
Where I live up here, I'm in northern Arizona, so we get high winds just all year. It's always windy. I'll do releases on my birds and we're still having, 30 to 40 mile an hour winds because they've already loft flown in 60 mile an hour winds. My understanding is, it's the environment that they were born into. So
Yeah, every pigeon is different. Like you say, y'all have 40 to 60 mile an hour winds all the time. If we have that, we're canceling. If it's 20 miles an hour here, these guys and where we live, we're not flying in a wind like that.
no, and not even if it's a tailwind and gives you guys great numbers.
Most of the time, not, because I mean, if it's got a lot of side in it, it blows them
Yeah.
too far off. I mean, if it's got a lot of tailwind, it could blow them out in the Gulf, and they don't never come back once they get out over the water sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, just make them fly right over you.
Yep.
Is that how often does your club fly?
Once we start, normally we fly every week for 7 weeks. And I mean, we do have some rain. If it's a bad thunderstorm, we're not gonna fly. If it's got some rain on the course, sometimes we'll fly, sometimes we won't. Just depends on how much and all that they're gonna get.
And so, can we talk about the convention that goes on down there at the Texas Center and kind of talk about the actual? You guys are like we kind of talk. You're a combine, right? You have a lot of different clubs coming together.
Different states is involved in the Texas Center, and they have the different clubs throughout the states is involved in it. Normally, every year somebody different puts it on. Pretty much, like, to me, it's the vacation to go somewhere in summer, like to Tulsa or to Denton or to Houston or to Lafayette, or we've had it a few times in Arizona, Fort Worth. They've had it in several different places. Last year we hosted it here at my loft right outside of Pensacola. We had it at the Wind Creek Casino in Atmore, Alabama, and we had a pretty good crowd. We had about, I'd say, about 70 people showed up. We had a little over 120 birds, I believe, we sent to the race. We had right at 90 on the day, and the next day we had 15 more. I think we wound up losing like 6 birds out of the 2 days. It was, it's hot and humid here in July when it flew. It was right at 100 degrees. We went 160 miles that day. I don't really know where we're going to have the convention at yet. There's 2 clubs that's talking about having it. One of them's supposed to give me a answer in the next few weeks of if they've secured a hotel on where we're going to have it. And I will have that put out in my next president's letter in the digest. I think it comes out in November, I believe it is.
Okay, in the Racing Pigeon Digest.
Yes, sir, in the Racing Pigeon Digest. And they will start taking birds in February.
Do you guys have a website for the convention?
Yes, sir. It's texascenter.org, txcenter.org. And there's a Facebook page, Texas Center of Racing Pigeons on Facebook too.
That sounds like that'd be a really good thing to get out to.
Yes, sir. It's good to see different things, throughout the country. There's a lot of people that come that you can meet. They try to normally have a speaker, or we've had Frank McLaughlin come, Ed Menville speaks. We've had Ralph Herbots come. We've had lots of other people from Belgium that comes over and gives seminars. It's up to the host club of what you have, going on. We have an auction on Saturday with birds that's been donated from a lot of the big top fanciers throughout the country. Will donate a pigeon for the auction. We have a strong ladies auxiliary that we give. The ladies auxiliary gives the outgoing seniors of the year, that's the members, kids, grandkids, whatever, a scholarship every year. And this year, I think we had 12 or 13 of them, and each one of them got about $1,500 a piece.
Oh,
So
wow.
we
That's really
we try
cool.
to take care of our kids, and the women, they like to do their thing too at the convention. They go shopping, or they do all kind of things. So you got to kind of make it a family event to get everybody interested in being involved in this sport, more than just the guys. Because the women and the kids, they don't want to go to the pigeon loft a lot of times and just sit there all day and wait on pigeons. They want to go do something fun.
Right. Yeah. If they're going there anyway, they already got to deal with pigeons all year. So
Yep. They're there to go have their little break too.
yeah. Yeah. And then you said that's in the summertime, right?
Yes, sir. It's in the summertime. Normally late June, 1st of July, mid July.
Okay. Well, there you go. There's kids are out of school, plan a little road trip with the family, and everybody gets to do something they like.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's brilliant. I like that. Which club is going to be hosting it then this coming year?
I don't know yet. I know the Houston bunch in the Galveston area has been talking about it, and the bunch up in Tulsa has been talking about it.
All right. Well, we're coming up against the clock here. So if anybody is looking for more information on this, you can check out txcenter.org. They're going to be having the announcement come out in the Racing Pigeon Digest. And if you're getting that, I'm sure you've already seen some of their ads in there as well.
And if anybody has any questions, they can go on my website. It's blueangelclassic.com is my email. You can go on Win Companion. My icon's Blue Angel Classic. All my information's on there, my phone number. Anything you need, just call me and I can answer your questions.
Excellent. Yeah, we really appreciate you coming on and talking with us today. Thank you, Chad.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the All About Pigeons podcast. Please help the pigeon hobby by telling your fellow club members or other pigeon friends about the podcast, and make sure to leave a good review or at least a 5-star for the podcast wherever you listen. If you have a topic or a person you want to hear more about on the podcast, or if you yourself would like to be a guest, just send an email to allaboutpigeonspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.